This story is set as a fictional scenario for entertainment and discussion.
When I bought a secluded lakefront home to escape city chaos and HOA drama, I thought I'd found peace. I was wrong. A power-hungry HOA queen had other plans, and she wasn't just after my house. She was building an empire, and I was standing in her way. I never thought unpacking cardboard boxes could feel so victorious. There I was, surrounded by towers of my belongings, dust on my jeans, sweat on my back, and the smell of pine drifting in from the lake nearby. This house wasn't just a house, it was freedom with a mortgage. 2 acres of Colorado hillside, overlooking a glassy blue lake that looked like it had been copy-pasted from a nature calendar. No HOA, no passive-aggressive lawn notices, no committee meetings about mailbox colors. Just me, the trees, and my absurdly expensive espresso machine waiting to be plugged in. I'd moved from Boston less than a week ago. After over a decade of tech grind, noise, and neighbors who judged you based on whether your recycling bin lid closed all the way, I was done. Done with commuter trains, done with HOA newsletters, done with concrete. So, when I found this property, a sleek, well-kept 2-story with a wraparound porch fully detached from any community association, I closed faster than a crypto bro cashing out before a crash. My realtor said it had only been on the market for 5 days. A perfect escape, too good to be true, and then she arrived. It started as a low growl of an engine. Black SUV, window tint darker than my humor, pulling up the gravel path like it owned the place. Out stepped a woman in her 50s, postured like she'd been born on a podium. White button-down, pearl earrings, and a lanyard badge that glinted in the sun like a police shield for PTA moms. She didn't introduce herself, didn't say hello, didn't ask if I was Derek. She just looked around like she was trying to see what I'd already ruined. "You can't move in here," she said, staring straight through me like I was smudged glass. This property was designated for community expansion under Whisper Heights Regional Development Initiative. We're currently resolving the annexation status with the county. You'll need to vacate immediately until that's settled. I blinked. I actually laughed. Not out of disrespect, but because the sheer confidence in her tone made me think I was being pranked. I looked around for hidden cameras. Nothing. "Ma'am," I said, trying to be polite, "this property isn't under any HOA. That's why I bought it. I have the title, the survey, the zoning confirmation. Hell, I framed the exemption certificate and hung it in my guest bathroom." She didn't flinch, just squared her jaw like I'd spat on a sacred stone. This house was supposed to be part of Whisper Heights Phase 3. You may think you've bypassed the system, but trust me, ownership doesn't protect you from community obligations. I smiled in that way you do when someone challenges you to a game they don't know you've already won. If you feel strongly about it, feel free to contact the sheriff. In the meantime, you're on private property, and unless you'd like to see the paperwork or help me unpack, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Her eyes narrowed like she was calculating how long it would take to have my Amazon deliveries. Rerouted. Then she turned, wordless, back to her SUV, heels crunching gravel like gunfire. As she pulled away, she didn't look back, but I swear I could feel the loathing radiating off her car like exhaust fumes. It was in that moment, standing barefoot on my porch holding a half-assembled IKEA chair, that I realized this wasn't over. This wasn't just some busybody with entitlement issues. This woman had plans for this land, and I had accidentally set fire to them by existing. The first sign something was wrong came on a Wednesday night. I'd just finished setting up my home office. Desk against the big window overlooking the lake, standing lamp in the corner, cable management that would make a Reddit thread weep with joy. It was calm, peaceful. No barking dogs, no blaring sirens, just the occasional loon calling across the water. I was halfway through an email to a client when everything shut off. Lights, Wi-Fi, power strip, gone. Total blackout. At first, I figured it was the weather, but the stars outside were blazing. No wind, no clouds. I checked the breakers. Nothing tripped. The main panel was fine. By the time I reached for a flashlight, the power flicked back on. Just like that. Weird, but whatever. Then it happened again. And again. Always late at night. Always brief. 3 nights in a row, and each time a little longer. My smart fridge stopped syncing. My cameras blinked out. My alarm clock reset. On the 4th night, the power was out for over an hour. I called an electrician, local guy named Walt. He looked like someone who could fix a satellite dish using only spit and jumper cables. "Whoever rewired your panel needs to be taken out back and shot," he muttered, poking at the main breaker. "This ain't a loose wire. Someone's been messing with your distribution lines. You got an exterior utility access?" We walked around the side of the house, flashlight beams cutting through the pine shadows. Walt crouched down by the external box, flipped it open and whistled. "Yup, someone's been in here. Look, these lines were deliberately rerouted. And see this." He pointed to a loop of tagged cable with a generic-looking red warning tag. "That's not from the utility company. That's private contractor tape. They rewired your main draw to loop through a shutoff relay. Remote triggered." "Jesus," I said. "So someone could just flip a switch and fry my grid." "Pretty much. And if they flipped it while you had something pulling juice, say your HVAC or a server rack, boom. Goodbye house. Lucky you're not a gamer." It got worse. 2 days later, I turned on the kitchen faucet and got a blast of air, followed by a trickle of brown water that smelled like a science fair gone wrong. I called a plumber. He traced the issue to the external water access valve, the one that feeds in from the county line. Someone had manually closed it. Not only that, they'd left behind a laminated notice zip-tied to the pipe, as if to taunt me. "Notice of temporary disconnection due to HOA infrastructure upgrade." I stared at it like it was a joke, but it wasn't. HOA, Whisper Heights HOA, which made about as much sense as receiving a parking ticket from NASA. This property was not under any HOA. I had the exemption, the court documents, everything. They might as well have taped that notice to a tree and told me to pay rent to the squirrel. I drove straight to the municipal office. The woman behind the zoning desk, Laura, wore librarian glasses and a look that said she'd seen it all. "No scheduled work on your parcel," she said after a quick lookup. "No open permits, no utility orders. That disconnection wasn't authorized by the city." I showed her the laminated notice. She leaned in, squinted, and raised both eyebrows. "That's not our logo. That's a stock vector from Shutterstock. They didn't even bother to change the font." On the way home, I stopped by my mailbox. Among the usual junk was a thick manila envelope, hand-delivered, no stamp. Return address, Whisper Heights, HOA. Inside was a typed letter on HOA letterhead and a formal-looking violation notice. It read, "Dear resident, our compliance team has observed multiple zoning inconsistencies on your parcel, which may constitute a reclassification under municipal code. Additionally, your property, formerly within the Whisper Heights boundary, was prematurely removed from HOA jurisdiction. Corrective integration is being discussed with county authorities. Until then, consider all utilities and property modifications subject to community standards. Respectfully, Karen Hoffman, President." Karen. The SUV Karen, of course. I read the letter 3 times, then sat down at my dining table trying to stay calm. The phrase, corrective integration, rattled in my brain like a bullet in a dryer. She was trying to force me back into the HOA, retroactively. And worse, she was doing it through bullshit pseudo-legal notices and illegal tampering. No direct confrontation this time, just quiet sabotage wrapped in official-sounding nonsense. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or set something on fire. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just some angry woman with a clipboard anymore. This was war. You ever dig into the past thinking you'll find dirt, and instead, you hit a goddamn landmine. After the stunt with the fake utility shutoff and that HOA violation notice straight out of Orwell's burn pile, I knew I had to get serious. Karen wasn't just bluffing. She was trying to build a paper trail, a manufactured narrative where I was the squatter and Whisper Heights was the rightful overlord. If she could convince enough people, or one lazy bureaucrat, I could wake up one morning with a real letter from the county telling me my independence had expired. So I started digging. It began with the deed. I wanted to double-check every inch of the purchase history. I pored over my own documents, then pulled property records from the county's online portal, and that's when the name popped up. Richard Marlowe. He was the owner before the one who sold it to me. The man I bought from, Ed Covington, only held it for a few months before flipping it, barely touched it, according to neighbors. But Richard, he lived here for over a decade. I tracked down some archived HOA filings tied to Whisper Heights, buried in PDF scans from 8 years ago. There was one with Marlowe's name on it, in all caps, aggressive font, accusing him of flagrant non-compliance with community harmony expectations and willful obstruction of aesthetic code standards. Translation: They didn't like his mailbox. That sent me on a spiral. I found the civil court case, Marlowe versus Whisper Heights Property Owners Association, filed 6 years ago. And man, it was juicy. I spent the next 4 hours in the courthouse archive room reading through motions, filings, responses. Marlowe had gone nuclear on them. He accused the HOA Board of financial misconduct, falsified violations, coercion, and attempting to bankrupt him with fabricated fines. And it wasn't just whining. He had photos, documents, recorded board meetings, even testimony from former board members. Karen was mentioned by name, twice, as part of an internal campaign to target dissenting homeowners for strategic removal. He won. Not just a slap on the wrist or fine reduction. The court ruled that his property had been illegally annexed into Whisper Heights through forged mapping documents, and that he had the right to sever all ties to the HOA permanently. The judge's language was unusually sharp for something involving lawn chairs and hedge heights. There was a permanent injunction prohibiting the HOA from contacting him or attempting to reassert jurisdiction over the property. So what does a guy do after he beats a corrupt HOA in court? Apparently he sells the house off-market and vanishes like a seasoned war vet who's done fighting. And then I bought it. Lucky me. I found a phone number for Richard Marlowe listed on a now-defunct home improvement blog he used to write. The post was titled, "The HOA Can't Tell You What Color to Paint Your Soul." I had to call. The line rang 6 times before someone answered. This is Rich. "Hi, Mr. Marlowe. You don't know me. My name's Derek Copeland. I bought your old place. The one outside Whisper Heights?" There was a pause. A long one. "I figured someone would eventually call," he said. "Karen back at it." "You could say that. She's cut my power, my water, sent fake notices, and she's claiming my property is still under HOA review." He let out a bitter laugh. "Yep, sounds like her. That woman's like a python in pearls. She doesn't strike until she's sure she's got you wrapped up. You're the third buyer she's gone after since I left." I felt my stomach drop. "Third?" "Yeah, the guy before you tried to add a guest house." Suddenly he got flagged for illegal expansion. Even though he had permits, he settled and sold the place fast. Didn't want to deal with the drama. "What did you do?" I asked. "What I had to. I didn't just fight her. I burned every bridge she had. Got court orders, restraining notices. Got her on record admitting she tampered with board minutes. She got away with it. Mostly. She always finds a way to crawl back in." "I have your court ruling," I said. "It's solid." "She doesn't care," Richard said. "She doesn't need to win legally. She just needs to exhaust you, confuse the officials, make your life miserable until you sell. She's playing attrition, not law." That sat with me for a second. Then I asked what I really needed to know. "Would you help me?" Another pause. Then, "If you're serious, if you're really willing to take it to the end, yeah, I'll tell you everything. I've got documents, audio, emails, stuff I never turned over to the court because my lawyer said it was overkill." I leaned back in my chair, heart racing. I want it all. "All right," he said. "Then you're gonna need more than just a lawyer. You're gonna need a goddamn file system, and backups, and a will, just in case." He was only half joking. We agreed to meet in person the following week, somewhere neutral. In the meantime, he sent me a zip folder of files via encrypted email. The contents read like a conspiracy thriller. Financial spreadsheets showing redirected HOA fees, personal projects Karen had charged to the HOA budget, including landscape development on a private parcel not listed in any county record, meeting transcripts, redlined emails with deleted lines recovered, one document titled Reintegration Strategy, Phase 3 Confidential. My property was listed by parcel number. She'd planned for this. Maybe not me specifically, but the land. The location, the view, and she wasn't improvising. She was following a plan. That night, I stared out at the lake and realized that this wasn't just a petty power trip. Karen was running something bigger, something orchestrated, and for whatever reason, she thought my home, my actual legally purchased home, belonged to her kingdom. I wasn't about to give her the crown. I thought I'd seen the worst of it. The sabotage, the fake notices, the power games. But Karen still had cards to play, and she was finally ready to go full frontal. It started on a sunny Tuesday morning. I was drinking coffee on the porch, trying to pretend that my life wasn't slowly turning into a true crime podcast, when a white county vehicle pulled up to my driveway. One of those unmarked Ford Explorers with a light bar tucked behind the windshield and municipal plates. Out stepped a man in uniform, badge, utility belt, clipboard. Not a sheriff's deputy, not code enforcement either, building inspector. He was polite, said he was responding to an anonymous report of unauthorized construction and possible encroachment on municipal land. I asked to see the complaint. He shrugged, said it was a standard form response, but the complaint alleged I'd built a fence that extended past my parcel line and was obstructing future development easement. I almost laughed in his face. Instead, I led him calmly around the property, pulled out my plat map, my zoning certificate, the boundary survey I'd paid for when I closed on the house. Everything was immaculate. I had receipts, GPS coordinates, and the actual iron stakes still embedded in the ground from the original survey. He scanned the papers, nodded slowly, and finally said, "Honestly, this isn't the first time this address has come up. This HOA's president, Karen Hoffman, she's filed at least 3 reports on parcels that aren't even in her jurisdiction. Looks like she's trying to paper over the gaps between her turf and the rest of the area." I blinked. So, this is a pattern. Big one. We're starting to log it. Off the record, you might want to start documenting everything. People like her thrive on misinterpretation and bureaucratic confusion. That was the final nudge I needed. I wasn't going to just respond to her anymore. I was going to bait her. I knew her game now. Karen needed me to appear in violation of something. Anything. That way, she could escalate, fabricate urgency, build pressure, and I realized something else. She couldn't help herself. Her ego wouldn't allow her to ignore something that looked like a violation, especially not if it was right on the edge of her land. So I built a decoy. It started with an old prefab shed I picked up off Craigslist, just a flimsy wooden frame I could assemble in a day. I painted it a garish shade of beige and planted it right at the property line facing Whisper Heights, just past where she claimed the community expansion zone began. I surrounded it with buckets, planks, and bags of fertilizer. Made it look temporary, suspicious, like I was trying to hide something. Then I installed the cameras, 4 of them, 1 tucked into the porch light, 1 in a fake birdhouse nearby, 2 trail cams mounted in trees at different angles, all set to motion detection, all with cloud backup. I even rigged a fake Wi-Fi antenna on the roof of the shed, just for visual flair. Then I waited. She didn't disappoint. 3 nights later, at around 2 in the morning, motion alerts pinged my phone. I watched in real time from my bedroom as Karen, dressed in black yoga pants and a Whisper Heights sweatshirt, squeezed through the bushes along the shared path and stepped onto my property. She circled the shed slowly, flashlight in hand, took photos, jiggled the door handle. Then she removed one of the caution signs I'd posted, "Private property, no HOA access without warrant," and stuffed it into her tote bag. And then she did something glorious. She pulled out a small spray bottle and marked the corner of the shed with pink chalk spray, the kind used in construction to designate illegal features. She was trying to create a paper trail, visual evidence that could be referenced later in photos, so she could pretend she'd flagged a code violation. Except this time, I was the one watching. The next morning, I made copies of the footage, all angles, crystal clear. Then I printed out stills and delivered them with a neat little summary to the same county inspector who'd visited me. He called me back that afternoon, trying not to sound impressed. "You recorded her trespassing. She marked my property with illegal enforcement indicators. You're not going to press charges?" "Not yet," I said, "but I'm escalating." And I did. I submitted the footage as part of a formal complaint to the sheriff's office. Trespassing, vandalism, impersonation of an official. I sent copies to the zoning department, the local planning board, and even the county commissioner's office. I included a notarized statement, copies of my parcel maps, and a link to the previous court ruling from Richard Marlowe's case. But the best part, I uploaded a heavily redacted version of the video to YouTube. No address, no names, just HOA president caught illegally tagging private property. It went semi-viral in local circles. A Reddit thread spun up titled, "This is why people hate HOAs." Someone made a gif of Karen spraying the pink chalk and captioned it, "Karen's crown of authority." I didn't engage. I didn't comment. I just watched the internet do what it does best, remember everything. 3 days later, I got a letter from a lawyer representing Whisper Heights HOA. It was full of threatening language, cease and desist, defamation, slander, blah, blah, blah. I read it twice, then filed it under Future Firestarter and went back to work. because this time Karen hadn't just tried to fake a violation. She'd walked into my trap and handed me a smoking gun, and I wasn't done with her yet. I should have known she wouldn't stay quiet after the camera stunt. The footage of her trespassing was out there, public. I hadn't used her name, but the local grapevine didn't need subtitles. Karen knew I'd outmaneuvered her, and she wasn't the type to lick her wounds in private. She wanted the upper hand back, but not through another confrontation. This time, she switched tactics entirely. A week after the video hit Reddit, signs began to appear. Literally, signs. They started popping up near the Whisper Heights entrance and around the neighboring community trailheads. Big plastic boards on stakes, printed professionally, reading, "Save our community, stop illegal development," beneath the slogan, "Join the Whisper Preservation Task Force. Help protect our future." I stared at the first one for a full minute, blinking. My first thought, she was trying to sound like Greenpeace. My second, this woman was seriously unwell. I followed the QR code printed at the bottom. It led to a clean-looking website. White background, forest green header, stock photo of a happy, diverse neighborhood smiling under blue skies. The domain, Save Whisper. It looked legit. Scrolled like a nonprofit. Had tabs for history, community vision, resources, and of course, report a concern. Then I hit the Our Mission page, and there it was. A full manifesto written in Karen's smug, bureaucratic tone, arguing that Whisper Heights had lost critical parcels over the years due to clerical oversight, premature sales, and community disengagement. It claimed the HOA had a right and a duty to recover misplaced properties for the sake of unified planning and safety. It never mentioned me by name, but it didn't have to. There was a photo, a blurred long-distance shot of my house from across the lake, cropped tight, heavily saturated to look gloomy, captioned, "Recent construction activity on disputed parcel. Lacks proper community approval." I nearly spit out my coffee. She wasn't just harassing me anymore. She was recruiting people to harass me for her. I spent an hour exploring the site. There were fake testimonials from alleged residents. One read, "I feel unsafe knowing unregulated structures are being built so close to our trail systems." Another said, "I support Karen's leadership. She's restoring order in a chaotic time." There was even a downloadable petition addressed to the county commissioner demanding a reassessment of parcel boundary integration and immediate pause on developments not aligned with Whisper Heights. Planning doctrine, I checked the petition's back end. It already had over 200 digital signatures. Then came the mailers. Glossy brochures started showing up at nearby homes, some even stuffed into my own mailbox like a middle finger made of cardstock. They included maps that deliberately expanded the Whisper Heights boundary, showing my land as a disputed buffer zone. A quote was attributed to Karen, "What we're doing isn't personal, it's preservation." I could practically hear her voice in the font choice. And then people started showing up. First, it was a pair of older residents walking their dog, standing at the edge of my driveway, pointing at my porch and whispering. Then a woman knocked on my door and asked if I had a permit for my shed. The decoy one still standing. I politely informed her I wasn't part of the HOA, that my property was fully independent. She frowned and said, "That's not what the flyers say." That's when I knew this was no longer just Karen's war. She'd built herself a false movement, a neighborhood militia wrapped in concern and dressed in pastel polos. These people weren't bad. They were confused, manipulated, and in some cases, opportunistic. Karen had dangled the idea that bringing back the lost parcels would stabilize dues, boost property values, and restore visual unity. And to sell that fantasy, she needed a villain. I was that villain. But I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. I got to work. First, I built my own site, Free Lakefront. The tone was simple, direct, and real. It had facts, documentation, photos of my deed, surveys, the injunction from Marlowe's court case. I posted clips from the trail cams, still blurred, but unmistakable. Then I added a full-page feature, What Karen Isn't Telling You. I laid out the history, HOA overreach, the forged annexation maps, the failed lawsuit against Marlowe. I embedded screenshots of the fake utility shutoff notice, the chalk spray, the photo of her pulling my sign out of the ground, every move she'd made, documented and time-stamped. Then I sent a link to every homeowner in the area. I didn't beg. I didn't rant. I just presented the evidence and wrote, "This isn't a personal dispute. It's about property rights. Today, it's me. Tomorrow, it might be your backyard. The response was better than I expected. Within 2 days, I got emails from 5 other property owners, some still in the HOA, some outside, thanking me for putting it all together. A retired school principal down the road offered to help fact-check the next batch of lies. Another guy, a software engineer like me, started digging through the HTML of Save Whisper and discovered that it was registered not to the HOA, but to a private LLC owned by Karen herself, KH Community Advocacy Partners. Turns out, she hadn't created a grassroots movement. She'd built a PR front using HOA funds, funneled through a shell group. We posted that too. A few days later, I noticed some of the Save Our Community signs had been torn down. One was broken in half. One had bullshit spray painted over it. Petty? Sure, but cathartic. I wasn't under any illusion this was over, but for the first time, Karen wasn't the only one speaking. Her voice had competition. Her version of the truth had cracks, and behind the scenes, I was just getting started. I thought the worst thing Karen could do was lie. Then I found out what she'd been hiding. After my counter-campaign began gaining traction, I assumed she'd double down, maybe escalate the signs, maybe even try another stunt on my property. But instead, she went silent. That worried me more than her knocking on my door. Because Karen doesn't do quiet, so I went back to Richard Marlowe. We met in person, finally. Neutral ground like he suggested. A small diner just off the highway, the kind of place where you can talk about HOA corruption over stale coffee and nobody blinks. He looked older than I expected. Lean, weathered, eyes that had seen too much suburbia. He slid a manila folder across the table like we were trading classified documents. "You sure you're in this for the long haul?" he asked, not smiling. I caught her on camera tagging my shed like a gangbanger with a grudge. She launched a fake community initiative and tried to turn my neighbors against me. "Yeah, I'm in." He nodded, then opened the folder. Inside were spreadsheets, scanned emails, property maps, and one document that made my stomach drop. An unsigned contract draft between Whisper Heights HOA and a local developer, Ridgefield Properties, detailing a proposed land acquisition plan. My lot was highlighted in yellow. The contract used words like recovery, reconsolidation, and redevelopment zone. It wasn't just about annexation. Karen wasn't preserving the community. She was trying to package and sell off sections of the surrounding land to a third-party developer. "She's been grooming the HOA budget for this for years," Richard said. Back when I lived there, she floated the idea of expanding influence to other parcels. No one took it seriously until the board gave her discretionary authority over outreach initiatives. That's when she started funneling money into whatever the hell this is. I asked if it was legal. "Only if the homeowners vote on it," he said. Which they didn't. She never even told them. The pieces started to fall into place. The signs, the website, the push to reabsorb my property. It was all about building a facade, something that looked like grassroots support, so she could say, "Look, the people want this." She wasn't fighting for her community. She was gentrifying it. And I wasn't the only one caught in the crosshairs. Through Richard, I was introduced to 2 other homeowners, both from nearby streets, both outside the HOA boundary, both of whom had been harassed in ways eerily similar to mine. One, a woman named Alexis, had built a greenhouse on her backlot. Suddenly, she started receiving code violation notices from Whisper Heights, claiming her structure violated HOA setbacks. The other was a couple in their 50s, the Parkers. They'd received warnings taped to their door, unsigned but formatted to look official, accusing them of unauthorized structures and aesthetic non-compliance. When they ignored the notices, they woke up one morning to find their mailbox torn off its post. Neither of them had any contractual tie to the HOA. Karen had just decided they were hers. We formed a group, nothing formal, no name, no meetings, just an email thread titled Karen Survivors Network. But we started comparing notes. Collecting documents, Richard gave us access to a private cloud server where he'd uploaded everything, his case files, financial documents, HOA budgets he'd obtained through a whistleblower. We brought in a private auditor, someone Alexis knew from her days working in real estate law. He wasn't cheap, but he was thorough. Over the next 3 weeks, he combed through HOA records, campaign contributions, even land assessments filed over the last 10 years. What he found was worse than any of us expected. Karen had used HOA funds, over $900,000, to pay for everything from legal harassment to website hosting to landscape upgrades on a private lot she claimed was reserved for future community space. Except it wasn't. It was hers. She'd bought the lot 3 years ago, off-market under the name of a shell company, KH Integrated Development, LLC. Same initials, same address as the HOA's mailing center, but listed as a private trust entity, non-disclosed ownership. She'd been using Whisper Heights like a personal piggy bank, building a lakeside retreat with community funds, and no one had noticed because she disguised it as part of the HOA's long-term beautification plan. The cherry on top, the parcel was zoned for non-residential use. She had quietly filed an amendment request through a friend in the planning office, buried in a stack of routine filings. But it hadn't been approved yet. It was all there, hidden in plain sight. So we built the dossier, a full report with charts, timelines, evidence logs, scanned documents, legal precedents, and a breakdown of every misused dollar. We didn't go to court yet. First, we went to the people. We held a meeting, not a protest, not a campaign. A public transparency forum, announced with a flyer mailed to every address within and around Whisper Heights. We rented a community center on neutral ground, no HOA affiliation. We called it Property Rights and Community Abuse, a conversation. Over 30 people showed up. Karen didn't, but her lawyer did. He sat in the back, didn't speak, didn't take notes, just watched. We presented everything. No ranting, no accusations, just facts, numbers, maps, paper trails, and people listened. They asked questions. They realized they weren't crazy. Some of them had seen weird fees on their dues. Others remembered HOA meetings that suddenly went board only. And a few admitted they'd supported Karen's initiative at first, until they saw the website domain was registered to a private company. It wasn't the end, not even close. But it was the first moment I felt something shift. Like the tide had paused. People were starting to see her for what she was. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Filing a lawsuit is one thing. Filing it against someone like Karen is another entirely. We had the evidence. We had the team. We had motive, means, opportunity, and about 4 gigabytes of dirt. Our private auditor finalized the report. Our lawyer prepped the civil claim, and we coordinated with a county investigator who'd quietly confirmed interest from the district attorney's office. It was all ready, locked and loaded. And then, just before we hit send on the first filing, it started. Not from Karen directly, that would have been too obvious. No, she came at us sideways with misdirection and mischief. The lawyer Alexis had hired got a call from his licensing board. Anonymous complaint, alleging misconduct on a previous case he'd worked. Baseless, but enough to trigger a review. 2 of the other homeowners who joined us, Michael and Linda Parker, suddenly had a county code enforcement officer show up at their door. Someone had reported unauthorized grading work behind their fence. Again, bogus, but enough to waste hours and money. Then, one evening, I came home to find a certified envelope shoved through my door. Inside was a typed message. "You're not the first to fight her. The others regretted it. I suggest you take your victory and walk away before the rest of your life becomes public record." No signature, but the envelope had traces of lilac perfume, just like Karen always wore during her HOA walkthroughs. Subtle, petty, perfectly in character. The next day, an email showed up in my inbox from a burner account. No subject line, just a PDF attachment. I hesitated, then opened it on a secure machine. It was a background report on me. Photos from my old LinkedIn, screenshots of dumb tweets from 2013, even records of a traffic violation from Massachusetts when I was 24. Harmless stuff, but curated in a way to look shady, like someone was assembling a character assassination kit. I wasn't afraid, but I was pissed. So instead of slowing down, I went faster. We filed civil suit against Karen Hoffman and the Whisper Heights HOA board. Fraud, misuse of funds, trespassing, malicious prosecution, abuse of authority, impersonation of municipal agents. And we didn't stop there. We filed a motion with the county to freeze all current HOA financial disbursements, pending investigation. We sent an open letter to every homeowner in Whisper Heights with a summary of the claims and instructions on how to join a potential class action. We even forwarded our report to local journalists. One of them bit. An article appeared 2 days later in the Sunday paper, headlined, "HOA or Cartel? Whisper Heights president accused of land grab scheme. It included quotes from Richard from Alexis, even a redacted image of Karen on my property at night. She looked like a Scooby-Doo villain caught mid-spray. The community? Split. Some residents still clung to her like a cult leader, but others, especially the ones outside the core HOA bubble, began distancing themselves. A few even sent anonymous emails with tips, meeting notes, and budget reports. Karen didn't show up in public for a while after that, but we all knew it was the calm before the storm. The arrest happened on a Monday. Not with sirens or battering rams. Karen didn't get the Hollywood ending she probably imagined for herself. No, it was quiet. Surgical. A pair of unmarked cruisers pulled up to the HOA office, which was really just a converted model home near the Whisper Heights entrance. She came out wearing her signature blue blazer and wedge heels, holding a latte. She didn't even have time to throw it. 2 officers, 1 county investigator, 1 federal agent from the fraud division. They read her the charges calmly, hands on her arms. No dramatics. I watched it all unfold from my parked car across the street. I couldn't hear it, but I saw her mouth form the words, "This is outrageous," before they slipped the cuffs on. God, it was beautiful. The charges? A buffet of felony-level screw-ups. Forgery and falsification of municipal documents. Illegal use of HOA funds for personal property development. Impersonating county officials. Interference with property rights. Filing fraudulent reports to law enforcement. Wire fraud. Federal review. And the cherry on top, the discovery of a secondary account tied to KH Integrated Development, LLC, where she'd funneled nearly $1 million in community enhancement funds. The supposed future parkland? It was zoned and pre-cleared for a private residence with boat access. Her own lakeside getaway. Except now she wouldn't be going anywhere near a lake for a long, long time. The HOA board tried to distance themselves, of course. The treasurer claimed she'd been duped. The secretary said she never signed anything directly. But the audit didn't lie. Multiple board members had approved transactions, signed off on ghost contractors, and participated in illegal annexation efforts. 3 of them took plea deals. 2 others were indicted. Whisper Heights HOA was dissolved within 6 weeks. The county placed the neighborhood under administrative receivership, and a temporary oversight committee was formed to review zoning irregularities, refund illegally collected fees, and restore independent parcels to their original designations. That included mine. Every fine, every notice, every forged boundary line, revoked. As for me, I rebuilt the fence. A better one. Real steel, reinforced posts, motion detectors. I replaced the decoy shed with a boat dock, legal and permanent. Built with permits, paid with clean money, and installed with a grin on my face. A few weeks later, I mounted a metal plaque near the end of the dock. It reads, "Sovereign land. No HOA beyond this point." Reporters came, local news, a few national blogs, even one guy who wanted to turn it into a podcast series. I declined most of it. I wasn't in this for the likes or retweets. I just wanted peace. But something changed. People started reaching out. Homeowners from other parts of the state, from Florida, from Arizona, sharing horror stories about corrupt HOAs, secret buyouts, property theft, under the guise of bylaws and community standards. So I did something I never planned. I turned Free Lakefront into a full-blown advocacy site. Now it's not just my story. It's hundreds. We share tactics, resources, legal support, a growing network of people who believe that your land is yours, not some HOA president's power trip. And every time someone new emails to say, "Your story helped me," I think back to that first night on my porch, the calm before it all started, the fake notices, the gaslighting, the feeling of being cornered, and I smile. Because now I know how to fight back, and I'm not alone anymore.